Welcome to the TOEIC, TOEFL IBT Independent Writing Tasks, Day 2, Part 3. Our objectives for Part 3 are: provide a review of Step 2, Writing the Introduction, which we detailed in Part 2 of our video series. Then we will review the standard college essay format and its similarities and differences to that of the TOEIC and TOEFL writing tasks. We will also review the concept of getting the hook, writing a catchy, appealing introductory sentence to our essays. Then we will discuss the importance of developing the thesis and play a little activity that we're going to call Good Thesis, Bad Thesis, and conclude by introducing and assigning our homework. So, as we mentioned in the previous video, the TOEIC and TOEFL follow a format that's very similar to the standard college essay. And again, the standard college essay we refer to as a 3.5 format, mainly because there are 5 total paragraphs in the essay and 3 specific body paragraphs which provide sort of the heart of the essay itself. There is an introduction, a body which usually includes around 3 arguments or reasons and includes examples and details. It also helps connect to the thesis, which is introduced in the introduction, and finishes with a conclusion in which we revisit the thesis and expand on the idea. The TOEIC and TOEFL again follows a very similar format, yet there are some differences. For example, in the body, we really need to focus only on 2 reasons. So in some ways, this might make the essay perhaps a 2.4 essay. Of course, if you include more reasons, that's fine, but generally in the 30 minutes that you're given to plan, write, and revise, you're probably only going to get to 2 with any sort of sufficiency or sort of a satisfaction. Other important similarities and differences, again, as we mentioned with the standard essay, a standard essay in college generally is more formal, and in many cases the length of the essay, though it might depend on the actual activity, will probably be longer than 300 words. And if we include personal opinion, we generally have to support them with some sort of data, facts, or statistics. And structure and organization, language usage, and writing mechanics most likely will also be very important, though this also will depend on what subject or class you're writing it for. On the TOEIC and TOEFL, we did indicate some differences. For example, we said that it was less formal than a standard essay, that idiomatic expressions would be acceptable. Since it involves around 300 words, it's most likely going to be shorter than what you would see at a university. And on the TOEIC and TOEFL, the introduction and conclusion are perhaps not as important as the body would be. Personal opinion, of course, is sought after. This is the objective of the essay or the writing task. So in this case, the only thing we really need to think about is, are our opinions logical? And again, language usage, especially vocabulary, do tend to be important. But perhaps perfect grammar and punctuation are not as strict. In other words, you can make some mistakes and still receive a very good score on the writing task. And of course, organization is still very important. So, the introduction, it might be less important than on the TOEIC and TOEFL as compared to a standard essay, but we still have to think of it as being important anyway. Why? Well, again, the first thing we need to think about is it does need to interest the reader. So this is the part we refer to as the hook. And again, recall that many of the raters who are reading these writing tasks from the Educational Testing Service, they probably see lots of these and probably see lots of bad ones. So the idea is we want to make ours interesting and stand out so that we can get a better score. Of course, the introduction is also important because it does introduce the main argument and helps provide context for what we're talking about. And then, of course, the most important thing it's going to do is basically give the main argument, which we refer to as the thesis. And we'll talk more about that in this video. So again, the hook as we said, was kind of focusing on the first 1 to 2 sentences of the introduction. And it's a catchy way to try to get readers interested in your essay. So think about this picture of this young man over here. How can we get him to read what we're trying to write? Well, a hook is a good way to kind of get them in. On the TOEIC and TOEFL, we did say that there were a few hooks that worked pretty well. Again, the hook we refer to as the hypothetical hook, which kind of involves the imaginary, imagine if or what would you do scenario. The personal experience hook, which kind of starts from a personal point of view about your own personal experience, and this is a good one because it shows how you have some experience in authority, which is often very important when writing an essay. Another type of hook, which is, again, one that many students prefer, is what we kind of call the social view, in which you start with sentences such as life can be challenging or the world is constantly changing. Kind of very broad appeals to everyday social life that perhaps many of the readers can relate to. So the key is finding a hook that works for you. So as you see over on the right side, lots of different fish hooks. We have to think that fishermen, when they use fish hooks, certainly they use different fish hooks for different occasions, but they also might use them for personal taste. So it's much the same way that you need to do with developing a hook writing style. You need to find one that you like, that suits your taste, and one that you can kind of use, especially when you have to write in 20 to 30 minutes. You need to come up with something very quickly. So if you get a lot of practice and comfort using a hook writing style, then use it. Of course, the best way to develop a hook style is to try writing with different hooks and seeing which one suits your style. And I also would recommend it's a good idea to look at other examples of successful TOEIC and TOEFL essays. And ETS has provided a few examples for you to look at, which you can find on our writing website's link, or page rather, if you visit our class page. And again, I've also included some samples from ETS at the bottom of this page. So now we move on to discuss the thesis. So what is the thesis? Well, as you can see, the thesis is going to be perhaps the most important part of the introduction, in that it provides the direct answer to the question that the topic is proposing. So in a way, it is a statement that tells the reader what you are going to do and what you're going to discuss in the rest of the essay. Let's look at a couple of different examples. For example, in a defense essay, one that we've mentioned before, the team sports versus individual sports, the thesis, which again is the last sentence of our introduction, is going to help provide a roadmap for readers for the rest of your essay. So here's one example. This essay will explore why I prefer team sports to individual sports by giving some reasons for my opinion. So notice the thesis itself kind of provides a direct statement saying, this is what I believe. I prefer team sports. But then also includes language to say, and I'm going to explain why. This is kind of the idea of a thesis. The thesis is sort of, again, the roadmap for the rest of the essay. Here's another example. I prefer to play team sports because it offers many advantages over individual sports. Again, in this way, you clearly state what your preference is, and then you give the idea that you're going to discuss these advantages throughout the rest of your essay. Again, the thesis almost always goes at the end of the introduction, and generally can be the last 1 to 2 sentences. And it is possible to write an essay without a very direct thesis statement. But again, for us, it would be important because thesis writing is very much an important thing you need to do at the university level. Of course, another thing we need to think about is the thesis provides direction and structure for the rest of the essay. So it tells the reader, look, I'm going to explain why I believe this. Of course, one problem that students have is they want to put in too many details in the thesis statement. Remember, that's the purpose of the body. The body is there to help give detailed information. So the thesis needs to be general enough so that you don't give away too much information. So remember, the body of the essay will relate to the thesis, and more on this will be discussed in our next video series. So how can we write an effective thesis? Well, again, the thesis answers the central question of the topic, But remember, on the TOEIC and TOEFL, there could be 3 different topic types: defense, comparison, and explanatory. And each one of these does kind of have a different writing requirement. Remember, the defense requires us to express a preference for one side or the other. The comparison asks us to look at 2 different arguments. And the explanatory basically wants our opinion on something. So the thesis statement for each type of essay does need to recognize those requirements. Writing an effective thesis will depend on your ability to indicate those requirements so that your readers know what to expect. So for example, if it's going to be a comparison essay, are you stating in your thesis that you're going to compare something? Well, now it's time to play a little game. A game that we're going to call Good Thesis, Bad Thesis. So here are the rules. In this game, we're going to look at 3 different essay topics, one from each essay type. With each topic, we will have 3 sample thesis statements to choose from. You need to decide if each thesis statement is a good thesis statement or a bad one. And then afterwards, we will discuss why the good ones are good and why the bad ones may be bad. So are we ready? Let's play. So here is our first essay topic. Do you agree or disagree with the following statement? The most important aspect of a job is the money a person earns. Use specific reasons and examples to support your answer. Here are the 3 different thesis statements. I agree. Money is important in our society because it helps us buy food. I do not believe that the amount of money a person earns in a job is the most important aspect of a job, and I will elaborate on the reasons in my essay. I believe that earning money is the most important aspect of a job because it helps to provide for greater financial security in your life, and it determines your value to a company and how important you are to that company. Plus, making more money is an incentive to work harder and produce better results for that company. Okay, well now, pause the video and study these 3 examples before we continue. Okay, have you studied these examples? Well, now here we go. So let's look at example A. Do we think example A is a good example or a bad example? Well, if you guessed bad example, you're correct, because the first one does not actually answer the question in the essay. It doesn't ask us whether money is just important in general. It's asking whether or not you actually believe it's the most important aspect of a job. So in this case, A is a bad example. Okay, what about the next example? Good or bad? Well, if you guessed good, congratulations. And in a way, if we can look, we can see that it helps give a direct answer to the topic, but then provides the opportunity to say, I'm going to explain more in the essay. Okay, let's look at the final one. Good or bad? Well, if you said bad, good choice. In this case, the thesis statement is way too long and much too detailed. In fact, it already starts to begin to discuss the reasons for what you believe. Perhaps this could be a better thesis statement if we made it shorter and just said that we were going to discuss these reasons later in the essay. But in this case, the writer included way too much information in their thesis statement. Hopefully you were successful for this first go-around. Let's play again with a different topic. This time we'll look at a comparison essay. Some people prefer to plan activities for their free time very carefully. Others choose not to make any plans at all for their free time. Compare the benefits of planning free time activities with the benefits of not making plans. Which do you prefer? Planning or not planning for your leisure time? Use specific reasons and examples to explain your choice. Okay, here we go. In this essay, I will be comparing the benefits of both sides of this important argument and then conclude with my preference. I believe that your free time is very important and should be carefully planned in order to maximize it. There are many benefits to both planning for your free time and not making any plans at all, and discussing these benefits will be the focus of my essay. Okay, so once again, pause the video for a moment and study these 3 arguments. When you are ready, hit play and we will begin. Are we ready? Now let's evaluate. Here we go. So for A, is it a good or bad thesis? If you said good, congratulations. Because, again, in this particular thesis, we discussed that we're comparing something, which is what the essay requires. And notice that it does not give enough information away so that we don't know necessarily what your preference is. We're merely stating that we're going to compare the benefits, which again is what the essay asks for, and then we will conclude with a preference. So in this case, it perfectly explains the purpose of the essay and definitely demonstrates an understanding of the requirement of the topic. Okay, let's look at the next one. Good or bad? If you said bad, congrats. In this case, this person has not actually demonstrated they're going to compare something. They've actually chosen a side. This might be appropriate for a defense essay, but not for a comparison. So in this case, it's not appropriate for a comparison essay. It's much too specific. Okay, what about the last one? Good or bad? If you said good, again, congratulations. Once again, if you notice in the essay thesis itself, it discussed the fact that there are benefits to both sides, and that discussing these benefits will be the focus. Now, of course, maybe you don't necessarily have to state that you're going to conclude with a preference. Maybe that might be a better choice, so maybe you think A would be a better thesis. But in this case, C would be acceptable. It does explain the purpose, which is to discuss the benefits, and does demonstrate the requirements of a comparison essay. Okay, one more to go. Now let's look at an explanatory topic. If you could invent something new, what product would you develop? Use specific details to explain why this invention is needed. I believe that the world is in need of many new ideas and products, and that it would be too difficult to just come up with one new product to help humankind. In this essay, I will explain why I would develop a new line of clothing that is integrated with technology and how it would be a valuable addition to our lives. In this essay, I will provide reasons and explanations as to why I believe my invention would be a useful tool for society. Once again, pause the video and study these 3 arguments. When you're ready, hit the play button. Okay, here we go. So for the first argument, good or bad? In this case, we're going to have to say bad. Even though you could say that there are too many products that you need to come up with, it doesn't clearly state that you actually would develop something. In fact, it appears that you don't want to answer the question at all. So it doesn't necessarily provide direction for the essay itself. Okay, let's look at the second one. Good or bad? In this case, very good. It's very clear and does provide good direction. It does state that you have a particular idea you would like to develop, and that the essay's purpose is to explain why you think it would be a good addition to our society. Okay, let's look at the last one. Good or bad? Again, this one is probably acceptable. It does provide direction without giving too much information. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute, I didn't actually mention the invention in the thesis. But perhaps you mentioned the invention somewhere in the introduction. So in this case, you don't necessarily have to state it, but you do state that you will have reasons and explanations why you think it would be useful. Again, this demonstrates a good understanding of what the essay is looking for. If you're going to develop something new, it probably does need to be something good for society. So, to review, the better thesis statements are ones that provide an answer to the central question in the essay topic without giving away too much information. They also give a roadmap or direction for how the essay will go. And they also demonstrate that the writer understands the requirements of the topic. And again, this is very important because the person reading your essay wants to know where you're going and that you know exactly what the essay is asking you to do. So, here are some recommended thesis patterns that you could follow. For the defense argumentative essays, and notice I have highlighted the keywords in blue, in this essay, the reasons for why I agree or disagree will be explored. And again, the ellipses here are where you can fill in the particular idea that you're trying to prove from the essay. I will elaborate on why I agree, disagree, or prefer this particular idea. Again, you can fill that in and give reasons and explanations. There are several reasons for why I believe this particular referring to whatever your opinion would be, whatever side you would choose, and these will be the focus of my essay. For a comparison essay, remember some of the keywords we're looking for are the words compare or discuss. Most of the TOEIC TOEFL essays generally ask you to compare the benefits or advantages, but it is possible that you may have to compare disadvantages as well. So again, it might be helpful for you to include that language in your topic, in your thesis statement. So in this case, the purpose of this essay will be to compare or discuss the benefits, advantages, disadvantages of that particular ideas, and then conclude with my preference. And as we mentioned before, you don't necessarily have to say you're going to conclude with your preference, but again, it probably wouldn't hurt. Finally, with the explanatory essay, generally we want to indicate that we're going to explain why you would make a choice, or that you would provide reasons and explanations as to why you believe something. In any of these patterns, though you could certainly find other suggestions or ideas, all of these provide some sort of general direction and give enough room for you to explain, which will connect to the body. And in this case, the body is something we will discuss in our next video series. Again, for more ideas, visit our class page and click on the Writing Websites link. In our next video series, we will put everything together to write a complete introduction, from the hook all the way to the thesis statement. We will demonstrate how the thesis statement connects to the body paragraphs. And we will begin discussing the importance of developing the body on the TOEIC and TOEFL, and show how the different pre-writing activities we talked about in our first video series will play a role. Now it's time for you to do some work. Click on the link at the bottom of the page to do the homework activity. Thanks for watching. See you next week.